People think they know you. They see a smile and they assume that you're happy. They see jewelry, they assume that you have money. They see an adult daughter living at home and assume she's lazy. They see a YouTube channel and assume you're making a fortune. They see one tiny piece of your life and suddenly they think they know the whole story. But here's the truth. Most of the time, people aren't judging who you are. They're judging the story they've kind of created about you in their mind. So grab a snack and come on back. And in today's video, I want to talk about assumptions, because what people see is rarely the whole truth. You know, one thing that I've learned as I've gotten older is that people make assumptions based on very limited information. They see what you choose to share. They see a snapshot. They see a moment. And then they fill in all the blanks themselves. The problem is, most of the time they're wrong. People see me on YouTube. They see me smiling, they see me wearing my jewelry, they see me talking about my life, and some people assume that means I must be financially comfortable. What they don't see is the rest of the story. And that's true for all of us here, right? That's true for every single one of us. We are living entire lives behind the scenes that nobody else gets to see. They just see a little glimpse, a little piece. Yesterday, my daughter and I went to lunch, and we were having sushi. We were having sushi. And if someone saw a picture of that lunch yesterday, they might think, oh, they're out having sushi. That's all they would see, right? What they wouldn't see is the conversation that happened way before we ever walked through the door of that restaurant. When my cousin first asked me to go to lunch, I couldn't say yes right away, right? I had to wait. And I had to wait until payday. My daughter's payday, to be exact. I had to make sure we had enough money set aside. My daughter and I had to discuss it. Right? We had to make sure that if we ended up paying for lunch, we could afford to do it. And that's the part nobody sees. I wasn't going there assuming that somebody was going to buy lunch. We wanted to be able to do that, right? For the three of us, my cousin and Zoe and I. But my cousin brought my other cousin, her husband. And so it was the four of us. And at the end, he footed the bill for the lunch, and we didn't have to worry about that. But the part that nobody sees is beforehand, People see lunch. They don't see the planning that goes into it, right? People see the meal, but they don't see the budgeting that goes into that. People see the picture, but they don't see the sacrifice. They don't. And that's true for so many things in life, right? People don't see that I haven't had a pedicure in a year. I haven't. Not because I don't want one. I would love to have one every 2 weeks or at least once a month. But because I can't justify spending the money on that. I can't. People don't see that my daughter and I bought clippers and we learned how to cut our own hair, because regular salon visits are a luxury that we simply can't afford. We just can't. People don't see the conversations about groceries between she and I, right? They don't see the conversations about the household supplies that sometimes we can't buy. They don't see the decisions that happen every single month. Do we buy this? Can it wait? Do we need it right now? Can we stretch what we already have? These are realities for millions of people, not just me, not just you, for millions of people. But they happen quietly, right? So nobody talks about them. Nobody's mentioning that at all. You know, my mother, my daughter, and I, we lived together for years. For years, we were that nuclear family. A part of that sandwich generation, me with my senior mother and my little daughter. Not because we were failing at life, not because we lacked ambition, not because we didn't want independence. Of course, my mother would have loved to have been on her own. I would have loved to have been on my own with my daughter, right? But we lived together because that's what made sense financially for the three of us. My daughter was a baby. You know, my mother was getting on in age, and as much as she would have liked to, and I'm sure could have handled being on her own for those first few years, it was apparent that we all needed to be together. We needed to be together. And that's what allowed us to survive. And that's what allowed us to help one another. You know, when my mother was alive, we worked together as a family. When I became disabled and could no longer work, things changed. When my daughter became old enough to work, she helped carry part of the load. You know, at 18, my baby was a senior in high school. She got her first job. She had to pay the bills. And believe me, she wasn't making any money. She may have been making, if she was making $7 an hour, that was a lot. I don't even think she was making that at that time. But her little teeny checks had to go to pay our bills. I wasn't working for 4 years. I didn't work. I had no income. I was forced retired, right? And you know, my daughter didn't work because she wanted to, but because that's what families do. That's what families do. People see an adult daughter living with her mother and they create a story in their mind, but they don't know the real story. They don't know it. They only know what they can see, right? This is something that I wish more people understood. Circumstances are not character. They have nothing to do with your character at all. Living in an apartment doesn't mean somebody failed. Driving an older car doesn't mean somebody failed. Living with family doesn't mean somebody failed. It doesn't. Being on disability doesn't mean that somebody failed. Sometimes it means that life happened. Life just simply happened. Sometimes it means that health happened. In my case, my health took a nosedive. That's what happened. As soon as I lost my job, my health started declining. Sometimes it means that reality happened, right? And sometimes it means people are doing the very best that they can with what they have. And that's most of us here. That's most of us. One thing YouTube has taught me is how quickly people assume they know someone. How quickly. People watch a few videos, people do a so-called deep dive, and people look at public information, and suddenly they think they know a person's entire life. But they don't. They don't. They know what was shown. They know what was shared. They know what was visible. That's not the same thing as knowing someone. It's not. It's not. Every person you meet has a story that you cannot see. Every person does. They have a story that you cannot see. Every person you judge has a chapter that you haven't read. You haven't read it. Every person you criticize is carrying something you know nothing about. Absolutely nothing. The lesson in this is that as I've gotten older, I've become much slower to judge people because life has taught me something important. What you see is not always the truth. It's often just the part, the very, very minute part that's visible. You know, the next time that you see someone smiling, right? Like you see me smiling here every day. Remember that you don't know what happened before they walked out the door this morning. You don't know what happened. When you see somebody, you have no idea. No idea. The next time you see someone enjoying a meal, Remember that you don't know what sacrifices that they made for that moment to be possible. You don't know. The next time you see someone living differently than you would choose, remember that you probably don't know the whole story. You probably don't know it, and neither do I. If there's one thing that I hope you take away from today's video, it's this. You don't know what somebody had to sacrifice to be standing where they're standing today. You don't know what they've postponed. You don't know what they've gone without. You don't know what they've survived. And you don't know what they've overcome. You have no idea. You have no idea. All you know is what you can see. And most of the time, that's only a tiny piece of someone's life. I see you. I'm so proud of you. And I thank you for spending part of your day with me. I love you plenty.